Okay, so gesture drawing, you're essentially like trying to um, capture the essence of something. And it is really just quick, like 1 to 2 minute sketches, trying to understand the basic shape or layout and movement of something. You're really not worried about getting any detail. Um, if you have a little bit of time and want to scribble in some shading or shadows, that's fine. I'm going to share. Oh, there it's working. So a lot of our intuition tells us to outline things, right? We don't necessarily want to outline it, but rather we want to work from inside to outside to around to try and just get the general essence. So gestures are usually very, very quick, and you kind of just float around and are kind of like going, and then you're sort of like seeing where all the grapes are, and you're not necessarily worried about um, perfection by any means. And you might kind of come in here, draw a few more grapes. And then if you have some time, you might do a little bit of like mark making where some of these shadows are. Because we usually do gestures for about a minute, maybe drawing like a table line. Just so you start to understand like essentially the essence of the page here. So I just did that on the same layer, so it's not going to do it. But you can start to see just sort of like me starting to understand the main essence of something without having to worry so much about perfection. So I usually a gesture drawing, I don't really erase anything. I just am kind of getting the main idea of something, kind of how the layout goes. Just shadow over here. So that's sort of how gestures work. So I'm going to give you a chance to do some. We're actually going to do some animals gestures. Hang on. Let me stop this share and do a new one. So you can go ahead and get your sketchbook out, and your drawing is thinking about translation, particularly if you're drawing something that you want to translate to a 1-to-1 ratio. So a 1-to-1 ratio, right, just means that you're trying to make something the exact same size. All right. So one thing that you can do if you're observing it, even if I was like observing this bottle, move this over a little. If I was observing this bottle and I wanted to look at it, something I can do is you can hold your arm out straight, and then you can measure, right, from like the tip of your pencil, from the tip of your pencil to where it's at the edge of your pencil, just kind of like measure it like that. And then if you bring this over here, you'll know if that's your starting point. You would know how long to make your line. So from here to here, okay? So that's like one way you can use measuring. And you can use that on a flat piece of paper. You can use it on objects, right? It just allows you to create images that are the same size, creating measurements. And if you're having trouble, one thing you can do is you can close one eye, and that helps you to see the measurements a little easier because you are translating it. Because what closing one eye does is it actually, we see in what's called stereoscopic vision, because we have a gap in between our eyes, so we're actually not seeing the full space, but our eyes actually sort of make up the place where our bridge of our nose is and create the whole scope of our vision. And it creates that sort of 3D sensation. But if you close one eye, you actually flatten everything back out again. So it allows us to see space a little differently, and it actually allows us to measure easier. But creating that, straightening your arm out and measuring from tip to tip, right? And then translating that over tip to tip. This is actually a little short. And then I can get that line, so I know where that line is. Another way I can use this is I can measure the angle. So here I'm getting the angle, right? That, see, you can't tell, it looks all off to you on the screen, but I'm actually measuring this angle here. Just that I'm a little further back, but I'm measuring that angle, and then I can translate that angle here, and I know that this is the angle of that. You could either use like another device if you wanted to use, like, use this brush. I can take that over, so I know that's the angle, right? Find out how long it is. And you always want to stay in the same position so that you know exactly, goes to about here. You're always staying in the same proportion and perspective, so that if I'm going from like here to here to here to up there, my point of view and my range is going to shift. So that my shape and the size of my shape could shift. And then you can just like continue. So I'm seeing like my angle here and my length here. So it's this way. Gonna end there, so and then I just keep going around. So that's how, and that's a 1-to-1 ratio. So it's going to make it the same exact shape, same exact size. Now, if I wanted it to be larger, say if I wanted it to be, if I wanted to make a shape that was 2 times this size, right? So instead of just measuring this one time and citing it one time, I know that it is this big on my pencil, right? It's this size on my pencil. So when I would go to start it, instead of, I know it's that size on my pencil, but instead of ending it, I'd be like 1, 2, and I would end it over here. So that now is twice the size of this. So that is the length of my top. So every time I find my angle, right, it's this long, but I know it's going to be 1, 2. So I just made it twice the size. So I'm making it bigger. It's the same principle, I'm just doubling it. So it's twice the size of the original. 1, 1, 2. It's going to go about here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so it's just a matter of kind of finding your angle and measuring from there. Now there's one that's more of a curve on that. I lost my pencil. So there's one that's like more of a curve. It's almost more of like a jelly bean sort of thing on the slideshow that I gave you. So one thing that might help, instead of like trying to measure like the exact curve, if you think of this, think of it as more of a straight line, right? Even this, you could think of as like a straight line. And find the geometry first. And find those sort of angles first. And the length of that first. So if I was thinking about how long that is. It's from here to here. But then I could think about where it starts to go in, right? Well, it starts to go in about here. And then where that curve starts to touch again. So it starts to touch about there. And where like the top of the curve is. It's probably about here. And then that would help me make the curve itself, as opposed to me trying to like eyeball it. So I'm just working off geometry. Now that works for some people, for other people it might not, but it helps you to carve out the shape. So sometimes with curves, working off something that's a little more geometric can be super helpful. If I